what you know about me? I seen it all, heard it all. Oh, what you know about me? I done it all, just want it all. Oh, what you know about me? I seen it all, heard it all. Oh, what you know about me? Oh, what you know about me? Oh, what you know about me?
Hey everybody, we are back. Welcome to another episode of More Than the Title. I'm your host, Jared Thomas, Chief Revenue Officer at Outside the Box Digital. And I'm also joined by my co-host, Chatty O, aka Pastel Chatty, aka your favorite CEO's favorite CEO. What's going on, broski?
If it ain't bright, it ain't right. If it ain't bright, it ain't right. Black is so boring.
I got the black hoodie on.
I'm bringing color to this thing right here. Gotta liven up the show.
Yeah, my boy ready to pop. My boy been potting, y'all.
I'm ready to pod. I'm ready to pod.
But you already know, before we begin, y'all, let's give a quick shout out to our partners at the Live Podcast Network. Make sure you download the app to enjoy content like More Than the Title and other great, amazing podcasts. Also, shout out to our returning listeners, the subscribers. We're growing and glowing because of y'all, man. We appreciate all the support, all the first-time listeners. What's good, y'all? If you're not familiar with it, this is More Than the Title, all about having authentic conversations with some of the best and brightest in the business, understand who they are and how they got there, and understand more about the person. And today we got my guy on, man.
Wait. You keep forgetting the word exclusive. We're brought to you exclusive. You keep forgetting the exclusive, like we menage a trois with other networks and all that. We exclusive from Alive. We on all platforms, only from Alive. You got to throw in the exclusive. We're not
First
sharing.
Black-owned podcast.
You understand?
Network.
We got to put some respect on the name.
Shout out to the partners. But you already know, y'all, man. But today, like I said, we got a special guest, man. This is the brother I've known him since the beginning of the LinkedIn journey days. He's a multimedia brand focused on financial and personal empowerment, specifically for people that look like him, that are Black and brown people. He's worked across a broad spectrum of audience, from individuals to large companies, and bringing his message into practice. Right, his personal finance story started in New York, growing up experience of aspects of poverty. After relocating, started his career in the banking industry. He was exposed to concept, tools, and strategies that not only improved his understanding of money, but his relationship with it. But he's also an author, a public speaker, certified financial education instructor, financial coach with a decade of banking experience at various levels, and also featured on publications like Black Enterprise, Yahoo Finance, Business Insider, Forbes, and many others. So let's introduce my guy, our special guest today, Rakim Sabree. What's going on, bro?
What's going on? I appreciate the huge intro.
Yes, sir, bro. We gotta give you your flowers, baby. We gotta give you your flowers, man, because especially on this topic, right? You know what I mean? For financial empowerment, we know how it affects us in the hood and us in the community, right? And I just want to start off. Let's start from the beginning, bro. So you started from New York, man. Where in New York did you grow up from? Tell us a little bit about your background and your upbringing in the city, bro.
Yeah, I grew up in Mount Vernon, New York. That's in Westchester County, 4 square miles, and happy upbringing, right? I didn't realize that we were necessarily poor. But my parents separated probably my early mid-teens, and I had to kind of like step up, right, and be the man of the house. And so I became very conscious of the household finances, up to and including carrying the food stamps card, budgeting out what that monthly allotment looked like, doing the grocery shopping, doing the laundry. Like, I helped out my mom quite a bit. And in that process, that's when I kind of started to realize, like, or not realize, but accept that was that's the way that life was. Yeah. And in that, started to build from myself a vision of what the future was going to look like. That included getting an apartment, being on Section 8, and having food stamps. So when I talk about the mindset shift and the relationship with money, I talk about that story very intimately, because I went from living in an apartment and aspiring to essentially go out and do the same things that my mom had to do in order to survive, to becoming a homeowner of a multifamily home where, I could generate income, and doing that before 30. So I bought a duplex at 26 years old. And it's all of that, certainly there's the math behind it, right? How much money do you need to save for down payment? What do you need your credit score to be, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the accomplishment, the testimony to that accomplishment, is really changing the relationship that I have with money.
Yeah. Curious too, bro. Are you the first homeowner in your family?
I'm not the first homeowner in my family. I am the first that that I could like touch right in my immediate family. So
Mm-hmm.
I did not have any kind of blueprint or path to what that looked like. But I will say, as a follow-up to that question, that I have inspired other homeowners in my family through the purchase of my home.
That's dope. That's dope. Damn! I like that, but we passed something, and I can't let you get past it, right? So you said carrying the food stamp card. Listen, I'm an '80s baby, but when we had food stamps, they wasn't cards. They wasn't cards, baby. You had to walk in the store with the booklet, okay? The food stamp booklet, and each one was a different color. You understand what I'm saying? You had to rip them out. You had to rip them out like loose leaf paper. There was nasty days, man. And the booklets came in different colors, right? So like the 20s came in one booklet and the 5s came in another booklet. And it says, now I say that to say like, it just goes to show you, right? So, you know, me telling you that means that obviously I'm a little older than you. And I grew up in the Bronx. We're from the Bronx, but it's the same story generationally still going on, passed down, right? So I you know, we grew up not wealthy at all. Public assistance is what they call it, right? Food stamps and things of that nature. And you're telling the same story, just a different mechanic to give you the same thing, right? So you have food stamps on the card, we have food stamps in the booklet. You know what I mean? But it's the same story starting out to say that, you know, you started out in poverty and you've made a way for yourself. So, you know, congratulations to that. Congratulations to you for that, man. That's big.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, bro. But what was one thing that I think is important for us to touch on, right? Because I know Chad's a homeowner, yourself is a homeowner as well, right? And we don't get that information. So what was that one thing, right, that really stood out for you besides, you know, us growing up in a similar situation? What you think differentiated your mindset, right, and made you want to change versus other people that's in our community?
So I talk about this framework, right, of the 3 E's: exposure, education, execution. And it was literally that, right? The exposure to somebody who, I mean, was within 5 years of my age, who owned a home and was talking about buying another one. So I'm like, wait a second, this is something that is possible, something that's possible for somebody under 30. How do I bring that reality into my own? And so I think sometimes, and I don't want to oversimplify, you know, getting out of the struggle, right? Because there's a process. And I think, you know, certainly there were aspects of me being in the right place at the right time, talking to the right people. But just simply acknowledging that something is possible by seeing somebody else do it is huge, and being able to start trying to change your mindset around what the acquisition of that goal might be. And so that was the big thing for me, talking to somebody who owned a multifamily property, and, you know, about their process, collecting rent, the headaches that they had, and, you know, going through the whole thing. And this person, and there was a community of people, but this person specifically pointed me to professionals who could help me, whether that be a realtor, whether that be a lender, whether that be you know, an inspector, walk through the inspection with me. And so as I'm going through all of these things by myself for the first time, I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't know, you know, what to look for, what questions to ask. When I started working with the realtor, he's like, well, you know, what is the criteria that you have? Do you want a driveway? Do you want a garage? Do you want a fence? Do you want a backyard? And I'm like, I don't know. Do you want heat? Then of course you want heat. Do you want gas? Do you want oil?
Want it all, baby.
Yeah. So I'm sitting there like, I don't know the answers to these questions. And so having somebody who could kind of like walk through that process with you, mentor you in a way, tell you what it is that they did, what it is that they did that maybe they didn't like the outcome of, kind of walking through their mistakes as well, was huge in being able to help me decide for myself, like, what is this path going to look like?
I wanna chime in for a second. I want to again rewind it a little back, because you said you bought your house at 26, right? What's the relationship between the person that you asked for help and yourself? Are you guys family, or is this somebody just like a friend or something? Because this is important to segue into what I want to say.
Yeah, no, good question. So this person was a friend, was actually my manager. So I started working in banking in 2011.
Okay.
She was my manager, and we became friends. And as you know, we would spend 40 hours together a week. We would have conversations about different things, and money was certainly one of those things. Okay. And I really like this question because I think it's important to note that she was a Caucasian woman,
Right.
And growing up in Mount Vernon, we didn't talk about money openly, right?
There you
So
go.
we have conversations about, what is your credit score, or what is the credit limit on your credit card, or how you're investing in your 401k, and whether or not you're investing at all. Like, I was just like, why is she telling me all of her business? Was my first reaction. But on the other side of this, I realized that it was important and necessary to have these transparent conversations about what salary looked like, what the contributions look like, what the credit card limits look like, so that I can ask for more, because a lot of people don't know that you can ask for a higher credit limit. A lot of people don't know that, you can ask for fees back. And so it's a lot of the ignorance that kind of keeps us in these cycles, because either we feel ashamed, or we feel afraid, or we just don't know what are kind of these keys to building a strong financial picture in terms of like technical details. But then outside of that, exploring the relationship with money from a perspective of not having to experience survival, that's a completely different arena. And so, I had another person who I worked with ask me one day, was like, what does it feel like to be poor? And I'm like,
wow, that's a heavy
right.
question. Wow.
Wow.
Hold on, wait. We can't rush through that, right? You gotta have some balls to come up to. I gotta ask, like, who, what was this person? Because somebody else coming up to you like, yo, how you feel to be poor? That's kind of a crazy question to ask.
What's wrong with this guy? Am I kidding me or what?
Right.
That's the only thing that comes to your mind.
Right, you understand? Like, you might get punched in the face for asking something like that for the wrong, but you just come up to me and ask me, like, am I, like, you know what I mean? That's crazy. That's
I think
insane.
I have to kind of set the stage there. So I was talking with somebody else who had, experiences with poverty, and we were kind of joking about struggle meals at the time. So we're talking about, like, the peanut butter and syrup sandwiches, or frying bologna, and making sandwiches out of the fried bologna. And as we're talking about like these struggle meals, this individual is just kind of in the background, and they're like, can't relate, right? And so that's where the question was then asked. It didn't just come like, I'm walking up to you like, hey, what does it feel like to be poor? But it was because they overheard me having a conversation about some of those challenges and what that looked like, and then wanted to kind of inquire more into it. And it does take you off guard, even if the stage is set where we're having this conversation, because you don't ever really sit and reflect on what does it feel like to be poor. I think, and I opened up by saying this, right? You don't realize that you're poor in those moments, right? You realize that, maybe you don't have as much as other people, but this is normal for you. And so I think the difference between going from a place of wealth or of abundance into a place of poverty or scarcity is a huge, like, it's almost a culture. It's almost equally a culture shock for somebody who's poor to look at somebody who has not had to struggle for the reverse to occur.
That's real, man. I also want to, I think I want to go into the flip side of that too, brother, right? So we've grown up in a way, and we've had challenges, disadvantages, and whatnot, right? What is the biggest advice you would say to somebody that actually runs into the bag, right? Because that's also a big thing for our athletes, our rappers, right? Maintaining the money. Getting the money is one thing, but actually maintaining it and doing right things to it to make sure that you can, capitalize more on your investments or whatever you're trying to do. So what advice would you give to other young brothers and sisters that are about to get into a bag that came from the struggle?
Yeah, I love this question because, well, I'll answer the question first and I'll tell you why I love it. The biggest piece of advice that I would give is that more money does not solve issues of scarcity, issues of financial trauma. In some cases, it will magnify them. And so we look at what's happening in the media, and I'll point to two really prominent examples recently, right? We look at what's happening with Ja Morant in the NBA, right? And, how he can't seem to stay out of trouble. There's a lot of conversation around, like, this guy's a $200 million contract and he's getting ready to mess up the bag, but we're not looking at, what's the why behind it. And I don't think it's for me or anybody else to kind of like diagnose what his issues are. But I think that people are making associations based off of his behavior and his character with the money that he is making or has the potential to make. And those associations are not necessarily interconnected. The other example, and I just published an article this morning for Forbes, about it was Gabrielle Union. She recently went viral
The
because
50-50? The
she talked
50-50
about the
comment?
50-50.
Yeah,
Yep.
I read that. The 50-50. Yeah, I read that.
And so I go into kind of talking about, because you get the clip that only shows you a small part of the conversation. So I went back and I actually watched the interview, and she's talking about having to support households outside of her own, right? So her and B Wade have other households that they're supporting financially, and then they have their own household that they have to support financially. She's talking about how she still struggles, even in the millions of dollars, with scarcity and anxiety around money. And so I think there are a lot of people who don't have the money who are like, well, if I had that money, I wouldn't have that problem. But your psychology around money doesn't change just because you have more money. And so yes, you might have the potential to spend more. You might have the potential to support more people. But if you're not getting right, within and understanding how to change your relationship with money, particularly from a place of scarcity that says, I need to have it all, or I need to get rid of it all, because I think I know that's a reality too. Sometimes people are just so uncomfortable with having access to money that they're in a rush to spend it or to give it away or to support somebody else without establishing boundaries for themselves, but boundaries with others. Those things will eat into what your income looks like. And so you have a situation where today, especially, in the wake of everything that's happened since the pandemic and, all of the layoffs and et cetera, you have people who are making six figures living paycheck to paycheck. And somebody who's never experienced that, or somebody who's experienced half of that, will say, well, man, if I had another, $50,000, if I was making 100,000 plus a year, I wouldn't have those issues. But again, it's the psychology behind what your relationship with money is often not being addressed in those instances. And so that it doesn't matter how much money you make, you find a way to spend that money, or you will find a way to go through it a lot faster, just because maybe your lifestyle expenses grow with that money, or like I said, you're supporting other people.
More money, more problems.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
you touched on something very important, right? The psychology of how to spend money. And I have this conversation with people so many times that I'm almost blue in the face, right? I'm gonna ask you this question, right? Because this is very important to understand the foundation of where this comes from, right? When you're growing up in poverty, it's your normalcy. You don't know you're poor because everybody around you is poor. They live the same exact life. So technically, unless you venture out of your hood, and I mean far, right? Because we know Mount Vernon, Yonkers, and all that, a lot of that area is poverty for miles and miles and miles, right? You go to school 2-3 blocks away, your middle school, your high school 5 minutes away. You don't travel out. So now, you said you bought the house at 26, right? You got into banking, but watch this now. Here's how this goes. You went to a public school for elementary? Okay. You went to a public school for middle school?
Yep.
You went to a public school for high school?
Yep.
Okay. Now, but what college did you go to?
I actually didn't finish college.
Okay,
so
great.
I started...
That's even better. Wait, that's even better because that's a great baseline to say you bought a house. You were in banking and bought a house at 26. But I'm gonna ask you now: when was the first financial literacy? When did somebody teach you financial literacy for the first time? When did you ever take a class on financial literacy? When did somebody sit you down and say, "Do you even understand what credit is? Do you even understand how to start credit? Do you even understand the bounce of a dollar? Do you understand inflation?" Because I know, because we're a product of public schools, that they do not teach this in public schools, right? The first time I learned financial literacy, I was already a business owner. I was already successful, and I went back to college, and it was a part of my business degree that I had to take accounting and things of that nature, and then they start teaching it to you. But the first thing they did when I walked in the door was offer me a credit card. Right?
Yep.
So that's one of the first things they offer students right out the door. They know students come in broke, right? Because most college kids is broke, right? They know you're coming in broke, and they offer you that platinum card or whatever card. They know you're going to go in debt because you're going to buy pizza and a bunch of stupid things. So this is crazy because I'm going to backtrack it one more. You get your working papers at 14. 14. So the government is saying that you are legally now allowed to join the workforce where you're not child labor, right? Summer youth program, right? You're allowed to get paid. Back in the day, we got paid with checks, right? But I'm at 14, that's the ninth grade, but you haven't taught me about money yet. So what you're saying is I'm legally now able to go get money. Legally, you're going to take money from me in taxes, and now I can start claiming taxes on my own or whatever the case may be. But you've never taught me how to spend this money or
Right.
save this money. So
Right.
look at the institution of how you're setting me up to fail right off the bat.
Yeah.
You understand? So when was the first time that you actually started to learn financial literacy? Because it has to be a first that sets this train in motion.
Yeah, you said so much. So the answer to your question is definitely 21 when I started working in banking.
He was an
And
adult already.
the funny thing about how you shared that is working for the bank, I got the bank products for free, right? So checking account free, I don't have to worry about a balance, saving account, same deal. But also it's easier for me to get a credit card. And so we're sitting down and they give me the suite of products, right? The checking account, the savings account, the credit card. When I apply for the credit card, I'm like, I'm not going to get it because I've applied for credit cards previously, and I've never gotten it. But this time I got it, and then I received a letter in the mail telling me, okay, here you have your credit card. This is what your credit score is. These are the factors that influence our decision to only give you this much. So I think it was like $500 limit, and those factors included student loans that I had not paid. So I had 2 student loans that were delinquent for 120 days, and those remarks stayed on my credit report for I believe 7 to 10 years, and that had an impact on my ability to build credit. And so I had to learn like how to work around those delinquent marks. And like you said, those are not things that you're taught. I mean, when I'm signing the papers to go to school and take out the loans, of course, they make you read through all the stuff that you don't really read through. You click to the bottom and you sign. But I didn't realize that I had to pay, or that I necessarily had to pay in that moment. So 21 was the first time that I started to get the crash course just by being in the industry, having to sell the products to customers, having taken out the products myself. But you said something that I wanted to kind of like spend some time on. You talked about the working papers, and you talked about saving. So growing up, my family, so my parents, my grandparents, extended family, would always talk about save, right? They would always emphasize this value of saving. The issue with that approach, particularly with young people, is that we're never taught what to save for, right? And so I developed the discipline to save. I still have the discipline to save, right? But it was, am I saving to buy a pair of sneakers? Am I saving to buy a new TV? Am I saving to go on vacation? And so you save and you get up, especially at, 14, 15, $1,000 is a lot of money. $200 is a lot of money. You save and you get up to this milestone, whatever it is that you determine that milestone to be, and then you go and you spend it. And now you're starting back at zero. And so we're not taught to save for the long term. We're not taught to save with the intentions of investing later. And we certainly can't be taught to save for an emergency in a situation where you're experiencing poverty, because everything is an emergency, right? And so, I have a lot of conversations about financial education and the way that it's delivered, particularly to young people, particularly to Black people. And my recent stance on financial literacy, as it's become a buzz phrase across, the different industries, is that financial literacy is not enough. There needs to be more behind that. And so that's why I focus on, and you introduced it when you introduced me, financial empowerment, and more specifically, financial trauma as a barrier to feeling financially empowered. Because a lot of us experience that financial trauma through our early experiences with money, whether it be through observation or, a direct experience. And that trauma follows us, regardless of what our income is, regardless of, what job we have, the title that we carry, the things that we buy. And so helping people to identify and overcome that trauma is really where kind of my zone of genius is today. And so there are a lot of people who don't know about financial therapy, or that there are financial therapists out there, or that there are financial counselors out there who can help you improve your relationship with money beyond the math. Because there are a lot of poor people who know how to budget. You have to know how to budget, right? You have to figure out how to rob Peter to pay Paul, right? And so you develop those skill sets, but that doesn't take you out of that place of poverty. And when people are, we look at it from even a scientific perspective, when people are experiencing survival and their brain is perceiving this threat, they're not operating from their most rational mind, which is the prefrontal cortex, right? They're operating from their primitive mind that tells you fight or flight. And so because you're not operating from your most rational mind, you do irrational things like, well, I'm going to go buy me a nice pair of sneakers because this makes me feel good in the moment. And I'll worry about the other stuff tomorrow or next week or the week after that. And so when we make judgments about how people spend their money, or how people are not saving or not investing, we have to take into account what are the circumstances that shape their choices, because some people will make those decisions fully aware of what they should be doing, and will have guilt, will carry guilt or shame or fear around the choices that they made, but they are in a way kind of self-medicating so that they can get through to the next day.
Yeah, that's real, bro. But there's a lot that you said, the financial trauma. That's what sticks out to me, bro. But the thing with us being in the hood and living these situations, like us being in the war, this is how we've lived. We don't know that it's war. We don't know that it's traumatic, right? We don't know that. So could you explain to us what does financial trauma mean and how were you able to shift your mindset? Like, what was a financial traumatic situation for you and how did you shift your mindset to get out of that?
Yeah, so financial trauma is any instance observed or experienced that has a negative impact on the way that you view, interact with, or believe about money. And so that exists on a spectrum, right? It could be me walking out of my apartment building and going to college, and one of my neighbors is like, don't ever get a credit card. Credit cards ruin my life, right? And so now that conversation is instilling fear, right? Because I'm like, well, damn, I don't want to have my life ruined, so I'm not going to get a credit card.
Nice.
Or it could be a situation where, I witness a repossession occur or an attempted repossession occur. I don't tell this story often, but my parents bought a huge TV. It was a projector style TV from Rent-A-Center back when I was living in Mount Vernon, and stopped making payments on it. So the Rent-A-Center employees would come knock on the door, like, I know you're in there, like, trying to get the TV back. And so we would learn, like, not to go to the door, not to answer the door, not even to make a move within the house, to just kind of pretend that there's nothing happening inside of the house. And I think witnessing an experience like that certainly contributes to financial trauma. But as an adult, if you've experienced job loss, if you've experienced long-term unemployment, layoff, being fired, repossess, anything, homelessness, bankruptcy, all of those things can contribute to financial trauma. And what's really interesting about the way that I position myself in this niche is that I talk about financial trauma and financial empowerment for Black people specifically. And so I say for people who look like me, because our relationship with money in this country is unique in that, how deep do you guys want to go? Black people were
all the way down the rabbit hole. Take us down the rabbit hole.
Let's go.
Take us down the rabbit hole.
And before you start,
wait, pause. We got to throw a pause in there. Yeah, how deep you want to go?
Yeah,
but
pause.
Hold on. Rakim, we cool, but gotta throw a major pause in there. How deep do you want to go? Got to get a major pause, though.
It is what it is. He's started. But yo, I'm gonna say before you go, Rakim, I wanted to highlight because you said something about the Rent-A-Center. And that's a good point.
Yeah.
This corporation created a whole business model off the way that we think and the way we deal with financial trauma. There is no Rent-A-Center in Rockland County. There's no Rent-A-Center in Beverly Hills and all these other places, right? So I want people to listening to hear that shit. They already know how we're gonna act. We're trained and conditioned that way. There are no Rent-A-Centers in outside hoods, but in our hood.
But hold on, I gotta play devil's advocate, right?
What's up?
I gotta play devil's advocate.
Please do, baby.
When we talk about financial trauma, right, and we talking about savings, right? What are you saving for, right? So I'll give you a perfect example of a story of my life, right? When I was growing up, we hustled, right? We hustled everything, just everything. I was the newspaper boy. You know what I mean? We hustled everything, right? But my hustle wasn't really for me to buy expensive things. My hustle primarily was for us to eat. Like, let's be clear. Like, the lifestyle that I lived, when me and my cousin used to hit them streets, and I'm talking like 8, 9, 10 years old, if we didn't bring back enough money to that household, we wasn't eating that night. We wasn't eating that night. So when we talk about trauma, we gotta look at the whole lifestyle that you're living in general and say, I don't care about no goddamn sneakers. I don't care about no shiny shit. And we wasn't eating nothing fancy. We talking Spam sandwiches. You know the Spam. You know the Spam sandwiches.
Facts.
You know Spam sandwiches and oodles and noodles. We're talking very cheap 99-cent food, but we had to go get that money to eat. You understand? So when you got to do that day in and day out just to feed yourself, you're not thinking about saving. Saving for what? Because I might not even survive till tomorrow. So that possibility of me buying Jordans, or that possibility, I'm going to reject even if you was let's say, Rakim, you was my father, and you came to me when I was young, Chatty, and you like, yo, we can't be doing that. We got to save. I'm going to look at you like you stupid. I'm going to reject everything that you're saying because my priority is survival. Survival. Yep. And the problem is, when people grow up in the impoverished ways that we're growing up, you're in so much debt and you're living so much of a low life that's the problem. You develop this wall where you can't even thinking about anything past today. Tomorrow doesn't exist. If I don't get past today, tomorrow doesn't exist. It just doesn't exist.
But there's levels though to what you're saying, right? So you start up like you're going to survival. There's a point where you left that survival mode, right? And now when you got the money, what you were thinking? I got to go get the Jordans. I got to stay flea. I got to do this because now I'm in a
I'm being honest with you. Once we got to a level where we started eating, and I'm transparent. I don't mind.
Yeah.
Once we got to a level where we started eating, I just was like, can we get our own apartment? Because it was 10 of us in a 2-bedroom. I'm just being honest. Like, it was 10 of us in a 2-bedroom. 2 people had the bedrooms, and the rest of us was in the living room. You understand what I'm saying? Like, you know what type of house that is. It's not the good house. You understand what I'm saying? You know what type of house that is. So we wasn't thinking about sneakers at that point. We was just thinking about, can we just get a place to live that we can call home and we can be safe? You know, so it's when you say it's levels, there's a lot of levels to this shit. It's a lot of levels to this shit, man. Before you can even think about anything that you would consider as flashy, or, you know what I'm saying, like, you know, boost your ego and things of that nature, survival takes so long to get out of that. Most people never get out of that zone. So that's why when I get a couple dollars, if I'm living in the house that that kind of house for 10 years straight, and I can't see us getting out, we're not getting out no time soon. Yes, the first time I get a couple dollars, I'm gonna want a clean pair of sneakers. You understand? Or a clean shirt, or maybe a nice outfit, because I ain't had it in so long that I need something to hold on to give me some type of motivation to move forward.
Message.
That's facts.
Yeah.
That's all facts. Damn, we went down the ride. That was a real one right there.
Yeah. No, I think that was important to share too, because the public perception of what that spectrum of survival looks like can be limited to, they decided to buy the new TV or the new PlayStation or the new pair of sneakers, and not realizing that some struggle is daily, right? And fortunately, that was not my struggle, right? I don't want to misrepresent that. My parents would be furious if I did. But to your point, there's levels to that, right? So even if the struggle is not that, okay, I don't know what tomorrow is going to look like, I don't know if I'm going to live to tomorrow, but it's slightly better in that, okay, I know that I'm going to live to tomorrow. We don't have hot water right now, but we know that the hot water is going to come back on. Or we don't have lights right now, but we know the lights are going to come on. And so we know how to navigate that environment by lighting candles, by boiling a pot of water, by, doing what you got to do in that moment. There was never a time that I did not think that I was going to survive to the age that I am now. And that is a huge improvement from my dad's generation. My dad had sat me down every birthday up until the time I turned 18 and told me that, there was times where he didn't think that he was going to make, I'm sorry, not 18, to the time I was 30, that he didn't think that he was going to make it to 30. I was born, my dad was 17 years old. And so he's like, you broke a generational curse. And every time he hears me say that, he's like, it just fills me with so much joy to know that that wasn't a thought that you had, because it was such a persistent thought that I had. And so you guys touched on it earlier, like that generational trauma is a very large part of what the financial trauma shows up through, or rather the vein that the financial trauma shows up through. And what I had started to say was that the relationship between Black people in this country and money is so complex for a lot of reasons. But I like to point out the fact that our early history in this country, for many of us anyway, was that we were the original currency. And so now you look at the history of slavery as an institution in the role that it's played in generating great wealth for a lot of the organizations that still exist today, and for a lot of the descendants of white people who owned slaves back then. And you look at this narrative that's being put out in the media around, oh, well, we all pull ourselves up by the bootstraps, we all have equal opportunity. Well, yeah, there's a lot of opportunities there, but the mindset and that complex trauma that definitely does pass down generationally. There's studies that show that trauma does pass down generationally through our DNA. That doesn't just go away because somebody got a high paying job or somebody made some money. And so undoing the psychological trauma of what has happened across multiple generations, and then within each generation what those struggles look like, and whether or not those struggles have compounded those issues or maybe alleviated some of those issues. I like to really shine a light on that because it's not everybody shows up at the same place on the same level and has the same opportunity. And then we look at like the systemic issues, and we look at even to this present day, the relationship between Black Americans and the financial institution as a whole, banks, credit, debt, life insurance, investing, like all of those things. Exactly. There's an inherent mistrust there that is hard to overcome. And having worked on both sides of banking and being in the financial services industry, I drank the Kool-Aid, and I'm like, oh, you got to go out and get a bank account. Oh, you got to go out and get a credit card. Oh, you got to go out and get some life insurance. And why don't we have life insurance? Why do we opt to do the GoFundMe and the fish dinners? But we have to unpack the complex trauma that's associated with the mistrust that exists in those industries. And so that's why I don't hear a lot of people talking about the intersection of wealth, race, and our the psychology. So I spent a lot of time talking about that, and in the platforms that I'm able to share on, Forbes being the most recent, I have a column there where I like to explore that topic in depth and that intersection in depth, because it makes people uncomfortable to talk about any one of those items individually, but certainly all of those items intertwined. And there's so much there. There's so much there to unpack.
Yeah,
it's definitely a lot, bro. And I was gonna ask you too, because one thing that stood out, I'm gonna just take a slight pivot though, bro, because one thing that stood out to me was your branding, right? So when we first started connecting on LinkedIn and stuff like that, I would see you on there. I remember, I forgot where it was. If it was on TikTok, it was on LinkedIn. But I was like the only person with the hat and the hoodie on LinkedIn. And I saw you with a do-rag on LinkedIn talking financial literacy. And I was like, this is my fucking guy right here. So I'm curious though, when did you start taking that online, and how do you open up yourself as far as branding yourself so you can speak on these publications like Forbes, Business Insider? Because there's not many that are doing this topic. There's only a few, like Earn Your Leisure, Wall Street Trapper. You're in that same vein, bro. So what was your branding strategy?
So when I first started on LinkedIn, it was, drinking the Kool-Aid, right? Corporate Kool-Aid. I was very much invested in climbing the ladder. The do-rag era, we can call it, happened after I left my job. So I left my job in May of 2021. And that was during the Great Resignation, right? So during a period where a lot of people were just kind of like either burnt out due to the pandemic, or they just was like, you know what, there's more to life, right? People are dropping dead left and right due to, COVID and other things. Like, we need to like really value our time. And in 2019 is really when I started publicly building a personal brand. So I published my first book. I started working on publishing a second one and delivered a TEDx talk. And so I started to kind of get a taste of what it feels like to build on my own, not attached to an organization. And ultimately that came to clash with the organization I was working for. It's like, well, are you going to do what you do for us, or are you going to do what you do for you? And it just became a very uncomfortable, very toxic dynamic. So I decided to leave. And in doing that, I realized that there was so much about corporate America and what I believed about corporate America that had caused me trauma, up to and including, you know, how I showed up, whether or not like I had earrings on, whether, you know, how I talked, what I wore, who I talked to, what I was interested in. I mean, you're spending, you know, 40 hours plus of your life every week going into this environment, code switching, being somebody other than who you are, until you end up becoming that person. And so for me, the do-rag era was the unraveling. It was, how do I decide not only who I want to be, but how I want to be, how I want to show up? What does authenticity look like? What language do I want to use? You know, do I want to show up with the do-rag on? Like, do I feel comfortable showing up with a do-rag on?
Yeah.
You know, how you'd redefine professionalism, because all of the knowledge that I've gained, all of the things that I've accomplished don't go away because I'm wearing a do-rag. And a lot of people make judgments based off of, you know, how you show up, particularly as a Black man. And so I wanted to kind of break all those rules, break all those barriers, and still say, like, look, I still did the TEDx talk, right? Like, you could go type my name into Google right now, and I'm still writing for these publications. And so they were separate processes, but certainly they intertwined. I started writing for publications, I think in 2019 as well, and maybe it's 2020. And I just kind of like used that as a ladder, right? So I think the first publication I wrote for was Degrio. I started writing for Entrepreneur. And then, you know, Entrepreneur was a pretty big publication. So it was easy for me to move into some of the other publications that were smaller. And then when I left my job, Business Insider wanted to pick up the story. So they were very happy for me to tell that story. And so I'm like, all right, cool. Like, I have Business Insider as a pretty top tier publication, got a lot of views, got a lot of comments, got a lot of hate mail from people with like, oh, you know, you left your job, you didn't give a notice, like, you're a terrible person. But leveraging, you know, each level of publication was part of a strategy that I had learned through some courses and some programs that I participated in. And then this year, I got I got Forbes as a contributor. And really that was all about finding my message, honing in on my message, honing in on my niche, right? There are a lot of people talking about financial literacy. Nobody's talking about the intersection of wealth, mental health, and race. And so how do I position my expertise, my experience, my topic, my niche in a way that sounds different, but also comes with like receipts, right? Like, I'm not just somebody rolling out of bed talking about this, right? You mentioned I'm Certified Financial Education Instructor, registered financial associate, consultant rather, Persona AFC, so accredited financial counselor. And I have a decade of industry experience. Like, I've been doing this. And so being able to show that resume of credentials, experience, the work. I'm an author of a book that talks about money. I have a podcast that talks about money. Like, they were like, okay, like, this makes sense. Let's do it. And I hit the ground running. I started writing for Forbes in April. April 1st was my first article. I think as of today, I am 7 or 8 articles in. I've been doing roughly an article a week. And making big waves. Like, you know, people are reaching out to me and like, I've never heard of financial trauma. I've never heard of a financial therapist. Like, how can I learn more? I love your writing style. And I'm like, I've been talking about this, but you know, to your point, building the brand establishes a little bit more credibility and certainly gives you a lot more reach. And it's amazing. It's been an amazing experience rather to be able to do it authentically and show up my authentic self.
Kudos to you for that, bro. Real talk.
Nah, that's from the heart, man. And I appreciate that. But I gotta, I always like to backtrack. You know what I'm saying? I like to backtrack because we cannot allow ourselves to get away from the fundamentals of what the real problem is. So you said to me, yo, I was drinking the Kool-Aid, right? So here's the Kool-Aid, and I want to see if you drinking it or you put the Kool-Aid down, right? Real quick, because this is a multi-part, right? So do you believe as a capitalistic society, which United States is, capitalistic society, it is based on the fact that they must have a certain amount of failure to have the rich stay wealthy, right?
Yeah.
This system is not designed by nature for most people to be wealthy. It is designed by nature to put the wealth in the hands of a few and keep the people, the majority of people impoverished, because guess what? The more you're impoverished, the more you need help from the system. And when the system helps you, guess what the system gets to do? It gets to put guidelines on you. It gets to put rules on you. You want these food stamps? Then you can only do this. You can only do that. You got to go here. You got to go here. You can't work them out. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So do you truly? So if you say you're not drinking the Kool-Aid, then do you truly believe that the initial problem is the society that we live in general? Let's start with that.
I think that is a very complex question. And so there's a couple of things I want to kind of qualify as I'm answering that question, right? Yeah. So capitalism is the clash between independent business ownership and government systems, right? And so you kind of touched on that, right? Where if these entrepreneurs, these mega entrepreneurs like the JP Morgans of the world, the Rockefellers of the world, the Rothschilds of the world are in bed with government and shaping how government policy is created and ultimately how it impacts the end user, which is, your everyday person, then yes, there is going to be a kind of a manufactured dependency that's created. And in that, there's always going to be people dependent on a system.
I.e. the prison system. That's exactly how the prison system was developed, and it is what it is now. It's a private institution. It's a private institution that rich people buy into, and you get free labor. Yep. Almost slave labor, which technically the Rockefellers, and not the Rockefellers, but the people that helped shape and build this country, that's how you got rich. You had free labor.
Yeah, these boys potting right now, and they're gonna get a shadow ban.
I mean, listen. Hold on. Rahkim, listen. Just so you know, right? I didn't put on my OTB merch today. I put on the green, right? Because you said you was gonna come talk about money. It was only right. I had to wear the money green. I had to wear the money green glasses. So we're gonna talk about money. I gotta put on green. But if we're gonna talk it, we gotta talk it for real.
Yeah, no.
We gotta talk it for real. We gotta talk it for real. Yeah.
But so my kind of apprehension, if you will, and I think the very, very simple answer to your question is that, yes, I think that there's an issue with the society that we live in. My apprehension with throwing my full support behind that statement is that in a way it kind of discourages that free market entrepreneurship, right? And so I went viral on Twitter last year, I think it was, because I had shared a tweet that said Malcolm X was absolutely a capitalist. That tweet got close to 1 million, I think, or maybe 2 million impressions.
Wow.
And people were upset. People were very upset with me, how could you say this? And throwing quotes at me from Malcolm X about how capitalism is such a damaging system and et cetera, right? And I didn't even bother arguing, because at that point it was too much. It was overwhelming. My phone was blowing up. But I shared that in a very provocative approach to teaching, but I never got around to being able to teach. And then I'll break down, in this conversation, that the money that Malcolm X needed to survive wasn't just coming out of thin air, right? There had to have been entrepreneurship or revenue generation through independent businesses. Malcolm X was very much a supporter of Black entrepreneurship through his affiliation with the Nation of Islam, and then maybe even afterwards. But what I think is really the most interesting thing about the way that people in droves came to attack me based over that statement was that we have a tendency to deify our leaders. And Malcolm X, I believe he died when he was murdered when he was 39 years old. I just turned 33 on Monday, right? And so when I think about where I am in terms of the development of thoughts and beliefs that I have today, and how recent some of those developments are based off of the different levels of exposure that I've had to poverty, to wealth, to corporate America, to anti-corporate America, right? Entrepreneurship. He was still developing very much as a person. And I think that it would have been very interesting to see how his thoughts and beliefs would have changed should he have been allowed to live longer. And so, I don't know that there is a system outside of capitalism that exists that would be of the most benefit to the most people. And that's why I think I do lean towards the encouragement of entrepreneurship. And if not entrepreneurship, certainly ownership in some capacity, whether that looks like land, whether that looks like assets. And in that process, yes, there are going to be people that have to give and pay, and there are going to be people on the receiving end. But if we can encourage more people to embrace concepts and principles that speak to owning something, or owning something and creating a business where they can generate revenue for the benefit of their communities. And we can also encourage group economics through that process. Then I think that capitalism in a form can work. And the system that exists today is so bundled, right? Like when we look at lobbyists and the role that they play in ultimately legislation, right? I think one of the big conversations right now is around gun control, and you have the NRA lobbyists who are hugely active and hugely funding the Republican Party or the conservative parties. Then they're going to influence whether or not guns are allowed or taken off the streets. And that's just one example of, so many different organizations or groups that are paying money into their own interest. And so it really is a difficult question to answer.
Wait, before you go far, that's not wrong though. I'm not angry at that. I'm glad you said that. I'm not angry at that.
What are you not angry at specifically?
At what you just what you just said about you. Like if I was we have a company, so we have OTB Digital, right? Let's say we grow the company to a certain level. If there's something that we feel like a law or some legislation that would come out that would help digital marketing, right? Or that would help branding for computers or anything in our interest, right? Anything in our interest, like Jared said, of course we're gonna help push that, or we would want to push that. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is this. If you want somebody to be able to begin to understand something, then you teach it to them at the most fundamental levels, right? Like Mayor De Blasio, and I think right before him, what's his name? The mayor right before him, Bloomberg. I think he started. So I went to school for pre-K, right? Pre-K, which was like 4 instead of 5, right? Now I think they have pre-K at like 3, right? They have pre-K at like
universal
3, right?
pre-K,
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Universal pre-K. So let's just start with that, right? So what you're saying is you want to start education earlier, right? So I'm going to say I agree to that, because if you look at one of the countries that's beating us out education-wise, China, their school system and our school system completely different. But watch this. What I'm saying is it's not a level playing field, right? And I'm not saying it's going to be fair, but it's a landslide. It's a landslide. And you being a financial guy, let me throw it to you. When I went to school, there was 2 alphabets on the board. There was the print alphabet and there was cursive alphabet above that. I got two boys. My youngest son will be 15 years old and my oldest son will be 22. And I had to teach them cursive handwriting. Now you working in the bank, I'm going to ask you this because I know you already know it's coming. When you write a check or you receive a check, on the back of it, what does that check say? What words do the check say?
Endorse.
Endorse. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Endorse, right? Endorse. That means a script handwriting, cursive handwriting signature, not print handwriting. I got guys that I work with that make $150,000, $200,000 and have to walk around with an illiteracy card. illiteracy card that say I am legally illiterate for the bank to allow them to put an X on that check and cash it. So this is what I'm talking about, right? So once again, right? You're starting us off learning education. Even to this day, money is still not all electronic. You know how many people still use paper checks? But you don't teach cursive handwriting in school. Now you got gender neutral bathrooms and him, her, she, her, and you got all these other topics that you teaching. But the most basic thing when it comes to money and finances, you're not teaching it. And I'm going to say why. All you guys are super smart that run these organizations, PhDs and doctorates. You're telling me that it was already in place. Why did you take it out? You took it out because that's the way the system is designed. So if you don't teach us properly, then we make more mistakes. The financial institutions that lend us this money, because we don't have it to lend to each other, right? We don't have it to lend to each other. That gave you that student loan, that gave you that credit card. They get to do the terms and the conditions or whatever the case may be. And when you default, they technically own you, right? Look at what you just said. For one little mistake as being 120 days late on a payment for your credit card, that was on your credit for 7 years. But they didn't take 7 years to teach you about it before they gave it to you.
I don't disagree with you, but I think using the example that you use, right, for your organization and lobbying, you talked about, I will put money behind legislation that benefits me, but there's not ever going to be a situation where you put money towards benefiting you that somebody else is not gonna not be benefiting. True. And so when we look at I think that, we should be careful, right, in terms of saying, like, whether or not we support it. And that's why I answered the question the way that I did, because it makes sense, right? If it's going to put more money in my pocket, if it's going to increase the security that I feel for my family, for my community, if it's going to increase the literacy and the education that I feel for my community and for my family, certainly it makes sense. But when you look at the other side of that, there is somebody who's going to feel slighted. There's somebody who's going to feel disadvantaged. And so money is so much more complex than I think we give credit for, because money represents our beliefs, our psychology. It represents power. It represents, are you able to be you? Are you able to, beyond just, are you able to eat and clothe yourself and house yourself? But like you talked about the private prison system. There's so many things that we touched on that all connect back to money, and decisions that are made based off of who is controlling the flow of money and who is the recipient of that money. So, so we're talking at a whole bunch of different levels, and I'm cool with it. I'm keeping up, but I think that's important to kind of qualify too, like these different levels as we're having these conversations. We're talking about capitalism as a system. It's touching so many more people than personal finance. We're talking about, whether or not somebody has the ability to sign the back of a check or recognize that they should sign the back of a check. And then, what that looks like in terms of illiteracy, what that looks like in terms of opening yourself up to fraud, what that looks like in terms of so many things that impact the individual versus, a collective of people.
Yeah,
right.
That makes sense.
Yeah, but the reason that I keep taking it back, the reason that if you think about everything that I said, I keep taking it back to school. Because before you can become that empowered adult, you're that unknowing child. You see how that works again? Before you can become that empowered adult that was able to get that job at the bank, you was that child sitting in that classroom. In that classroom, right? And eventually, as you climb the ladder, guess what happens? There's more children sitting in that classroom, that end up becoming these adults that end up running these organizations. Doesn't matter what organization. Eventually, us as human beings, we die, and you must pass it on to somebody else. So what I'm saying is, you're not even preparing the masses properly to take over.
Oh yeah, I'm agreeing with you that the school system is certainly not designed to teach people to be independent.
But is it up to them at this point when you're the unknowing child, right? You become the adult. Is there excuse in today's era with the access to information that we have today? And that's a real question. Do you think somebody not knowing cursive right now, you go to YouTube and build a fucking bomb? You mean to tell me you can't teach yourself some cursive?
Yeah, I don't have any kind of feelings of loyalty or disloyalty to cursive writing. I mean, I know how to write in script certainly, but
for sure.
that's, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But I'll throw this question back at you, right? So you're talking about preschool, you're talking about elementary school, middle school, high school, in the public capacity. What if, growing up where we grew up, financial literacy was taught in the classrooms, but you still had to go home to poverty? And I'm speaking from experience. So when I was in the 7th grade, I was introduced to the stock market. We were given newspapers. We went, this is back when, you didn't have, Robinhood and all these other apps. You went to the newspaper, you went to the back, and you looked at the ticker symbols. You learned what those ticker symbols were. You looked at the high, the low, et cetera, et cetera. We played this game where we were given a imaginary amount of money, and we were told buy stocks, however many stocks we could buy with the imaginary amount of money, and whoever had the highest portfolio at the end of the game won. So I was introduced to the stock market in the 7th grade. I don't remember how old I was. What is that, like 14, 15?
Yeah, roughly. Mm-hmm.
But I didn't start investing in the stock market until I was in my 20s.
No, 7th grade is younger than that. It's like 13, because normally high school starts 14, 9th grade.
Right.
So you were like 12. You were like 12. Yeah, you were like 12. Yeah.
So I didn't start investing in the stock market until I was in my 20s, until I was in my mid 20s. And I remember, and I've used this example quite a lot in some of the sharing that I've done around this topic of, when is it appropriate to introduce financial literacy to children, and does it make a difference? And I've shared that, because I was in a situation where survival was the priority. The stock market was the furthest thing from, you talked about it earlier. You said, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get to tomorrow. And so the key to success in the stock market is time, the time value of money. The earlier you start, the longer you hold, ultimately, the more wealthy you become. Very, very overly simplified, but that's the gist of it, right? The longer you hold, the more wealthy you become. But if you are in a position where you can't even save, or you can't even think to save, then you certainly can't think to invest. And I remember the thought around buying stocks, particularly within, our community, was that's for white people. That's not a Black people thing. And so the associations that existed with, I guess you could consider investing in the stock market as a part of financial literacy, was that that's not for us, or that's not for me. And so, again, going back to the question that I'm asking you, given the environment that we grew up in, if financial literacy or financial education was a part of the curriculum, would it have made a difference in the way that we see or believed or interacted with money within our households because we were experiencing survival?
Absolutely. It would change everything. And I'll give you the best example in the world. And Jared, you know this story, and Jared's going to laugh when I tell this story, because I always tell this story, right? Remember, you spend a certain amount of time at school. When you come home from school, you either go upstairs, do your homework or whatever, but you know where you spend a lot more of your time? In the streets, outside, right? Now, most of us come from broken families. Not Jared. Jared's mom and pop been together, but like guys like me, you come from a single parent household. There is no father figure to teach you these fundamental things. So guess where you learn it from? You learn it from the streets. You learn it from somebody that you finally look at and say, I admire him for whatever reason. And then you look at what he's doing, mixed with the intelligence that you have, and you go from there, right? So now, in our neighborhood in the Bronx, the only people that wasn't in poverty was the drug dealers, right? The drug dealers. And because the drug dealers came before us and went through the same exact system that we went through, the moment they got money, the first thing they did was get fresh. Clothes, cars, jewelry, in abundance, right? Now that they have these things, the younger guys like me coming up that have no financial literacy at all, right? What do I see? I see I'm broke, but clearly you not broke. You not broke, right? Because you got the girls, you got the clothes, you got the rope chains and all this, right? Now, when I get money, what do you think I'm going to emulate? Because I don't have any financial literacy saying the car is good, but it's a depreciating asset. See, I learned that later. You understand what I'm saying? I don't care about stocks. I only care about what I see because in my eyes, they're surviving. He's not begging for food. He knows where his next meal is coming from. He's going to eat shrimps and he going to City Island every other day, right?
Yeah.
So one of the guys that influenced me most, right? Let me tell you this very clear. I was just insane as a child. I was the child that they put a bet on that said I wouldn't live to see 18. Am I lying, Jared?
It's a fact, though.
The whole hood had a bet on me, as wild as I was, that I would not live to see 18. One of the most influential people that saved my life was one of Jared's cousins, right? My man Gino. I used to go to the center and Gino was fresh. And Gino had smelled good. But you know what Gino had too? He had that Audi 5000, baby. He had that Audi 5000 with the battery in the back seat. Again, we got skateboards and we bicycles. Nobody in my family at that time had a car. And you understand what I'm saying? A luxury car, something like that. So when I seen that, I'm like, oh, that clearly is what the definition of success is. You understand what I'm saying? So as I started to get money, because I don't know what financial literacy is, my number one goal is I want to be like Gino. Fast forward 20 years. I love you, Gino. I bought the Audi A8. I had to have it. I'm just showing you, Rakim. Like, and I was financially, stable at the time. But look at how I brought it full circle. Like, I just had to have it. Like, Gino had it. It was a status symbol. I had to go get the Audi A8. I had to have it. They don't make 5,000s no more, so I had to get whatever was closest to it. But I'm just saying, if I would have learned earlier financial literacy, you're absolutely right. It impacts every decision that I make. You're absolutely right. It changes my whole mindset. I'm also a United States veteran. I did 5 years Marine Corps. I didn't even go to college. I got a 1460 on my SAT. I'm all state in 3 sports and never went to college right off the bat because I knew mentally I would not survive in college. I was hustling. I knew I was going to go to college, have 15 babies. You know what I'm saying? I'm going down there with money. Baby, jewelry. I got diamonds and fangs and Rolex links. I'm going down there. I was going to HBCU, my bro. I'm gonna have 15 babies.
What's wrong with this guy? Am I kidding me or what?
I'm just saying, I want to show you something, right? Because you talked on this before, and I was the exact opposite because it happened in the reverse way for me. If you know anything about the military, you know after 2 years being vested, you get what's called the VA loan. Guaranteed loan to buy yourself a house. So after I came back after doing my tour, and I came back in 2001, I was 21. Had my own apartment. I was a brand new father, and I had the money right then and there to go buy a house, right? Or a condo and become a homeowner at 21. I came home with it was 2001. I had the last Trans Am they made, the 2002. Remember, Jared, the white drop top? I had the last Trans Am they made. And the very thing I did with the next $30,000, $40,000 I got, I went and bought the Denali because the Cadillac truck didn't come in white. You understand? And because I had too many talks with too many people that scared me from being a homeowner. Everybody that I spoke to that had a house lost their house. And it wasn't family because I'm the first homeowner in like 3 or 4 generations in my family. But everybody that I spoke to that had a house gave me a horror story. It's too much work. If you fall behind in your mortgage, they're going to take it. When you didn't explain to me mortgage is like rent. It's 3 months anyway before they start kicking you. That's anyway. But I'm just showing you, like, so it took me, I built my house at 30. And now I've had my house 13 years, so now it's a quarter paid for. But if I'd have built my house at 20, my house would be halfway paid, 3/4 paid for. I'd be 2/3 through the loan already. 30-year loan, 20 years, I'd be 2/3 through the loan already. But I wasted 10 years. 10 years when I had the money right there in my hand because I didn't have the financial literacy or the supporting cast to say to me, nah, brother, they're wrong. Let me teach you this the right way. So it absolutely makes a difference because I'm a living testament to say I lost at least 10 years behind illiteracy.
But I think what you just said is super important. You said you didn't have the financial literacy or the supporting cast. So the supporting cast is separate than financial literacy.
Right.
As I'm listening to you tell your story too, I'm also compelled to ask, well, what is your understanding of the term financial literacy, right? Because as it exists today, in the way that curriculums are built. And remember, I'm a certified financial education instructor. We're going to go and we're going to teach you about budgeting. We're going to teach you about saving. We're going to teach you about building credit. Maybe we'll teach you about banking systems, right? Opening a bank account, making deposits, whatever. Might touch on homeownership. May not get into the details of the programs associated with becoming a homeowner, right? So that's your FHA, your conventional, and your VA loans. And there are other programs out there too. But when you're talking about what you missed out on and for lack of knowledge, Certainly it can, financial literacy can have contributed to that. But you also talked about proximity, right? Proximity to an individual whose success maybe you wanted to emulate it. You talked about status, and you know, this is really my playground, right? When we talk about the psychology of money, there's work done by a financial psychologist by the name of Dr. Brad Klontz. He came up with this phrase or this process called the money scripts. And money scripts are broken down into 4 main types, right? There's money avoidance, there's money worship, there's money vigilance, and there's money status. And each one of these scripts are characterized by, you know, different things, right? So money avoidance is like the belief in, you know, money is the root of all evil. And so if I have money, or if somebody else has money, like they must have did something bad to get it. And now I have money, so I have to get rid of it, or I completely, you know, self-sabotage opportunities to make money or to keep the money that I have. Money worship is characterized by this belief that the more money that if I only had this much money, that it would solve all my problems, right? If I only had $100,000, if I only had $1 million, it would solve all my problems. Money status is characterized by not necessarily how much money you make, but how you can buy things to demonstrate status to other people. So it's not something that fulfills you internally. You gain the fulfillment by being able to stunt on somebody else, right? And then money vigilance is like this extreme worry that if you deviate from this very rigid plan, that all the money is going to be taken away from you, right? And so if you're not budgeting down to the penny, if you're not checking your bank account every day, if you're not, you know, looking at your statements, et cetera, et cetera. And so when I'm listening to you, and when I listen to other people, I play like this game, and I'm like, what money script is showing here? And we're talking about the Audi, right? I'm like, that's money status. Like that's what my brain is doing. That's money status, right? Like
Absolutely,
you gotta have the thing to show. So,
no,
what I'm describing to you, right, and breaking that all down, is that those money scripts are not a part of a financial literacy curriculum. That's pure financial psychology. And financial psychology and financial therapy are newer fields. They're emerging fields. And so where I show up in this equation, and why I do the work that I do, is because traditional financial literacy stops at the math. The 1 + 1 = 2. This is how you establish a budget. This is how you build credit. This is how credit cards work. Because even though, and we talked about student loans, so I'm going to go back to that, even though I had to sit down and take an entrance and exit interview for the student loan when I was signing the paper, and I had to sit at a computer for 30 minutes and scroll through the pages and pages and pages that talks about, you know, this is how much you have to pay. This is when you have to pay. This is why you have to pay. This is how much money you're going to get. This is the interest rate, et cetera, et cetera. This is the process if the loan is transferred. Who's going to be the co-owner or the co-signer on your loan for you? My eyes are glazed over as I'm scrolling through that. Financial literacy maybe would have told me what the interest rate looked like. Financial literacy maybe would have told me that I needed to pay it. But the reality of the situation is the reason why that loan went 120 days delinquent was because even though I was getting the letters in the mail, I didn't have the money to pay it. And so that's not financial literacy. That's me not having enough money to pay the loan. And the same thing could be applied to credit card.
But I disagree, because financial literacy also educates you knowing when to take out a loan versus your income and your income to debt ratio anyway.
Not necessarily.
I would never take out a card. I would never take out, once I learned money, I would never take out a card knowing that my interest rate is a certain amount, and at minimum, my payback would be a certain amount if I was unemployed. You understand? If I didn't have an income coming in.
I'm not going to say that that's not true, because you're saying that you would never. But I know for a fact that there are people who would still make that decision regardless of having that information. I know that for a fact.
Right, but I'm saying,
and a lot of the decisions that people make financially are decisions that they make because they feel like they have to make that decision out of survival. And so it's not a situation of I know better, so I'm going to do better. It's a situation of I know better and I'm going to feel really shitty about making this decision, but I need to make it to tomorrow. So I'm going to do what I have to do.
Okay.
Because the same is true as, like, you know, we talked about Rent-A-Center earlier. So we didn't talk about payday loans, but Rent-A-Center is just kind of like a spinoff of the payday loan system, right?
Yeah, they got the apps for that now.
Or even like, loan sharks, like, in the time of loan sharks, people knew, like, if I didn't have the money to pay this loan shark back, my knees is getting knocked out. I'm going to lose an arm. I'm going to lose some teeth. Like, but people still took that gamble. People still took that risk because they had to, or they felt like they had to in that moment. And so the way, and I think the statistic is something like 80% of the decisions that we make financially come from how we feel about money, come from our financial psychology, come from the emotional side of money. And so when we talk about financial literacy, when I talk about financial literacy, I'm very careful to make the separation between, again, the math of it all and saying, yes, I understand what an interest rate is. And I understand that if I don't pay this on time, I'm going to be paying this in interest. But because at the same time, so we'll go back to the student loan situation, I'm growing up in, like I told you guys, I grew up in Mount Vernon. I went to Mount Vernon High School as I'm getting ready to graduate Mount Vernon High School. And, neither of my parents at the time had degrees. I'm like, okay, I need to get to school. I don't have money to get to school. Everybody is in my ear telling me, well, everybody takes out student loans. To me, it already didn't make sense for me to take out this loan because I'm like, how am I going to be able to pay this back? I'm going to have to go into a field that's going to make a lot of money, hopefully, so that I can afford to pay back this student loan. But I was reassured constantly by people who were in positions of authority, by people who were in positions of leadership. Everybody takes out student loans. It's okay. Don't worry about it. And I'm not going to say that taking out a student loan was one of the worst decisions in my life, but it was an informed decision based off of somebody else informing me that it was okay to make this decision because everybody else did it. And so you're talking about the logical approach to money, which makes sense and sounds like you're a logical person, right? I would never do that because I understand that this is the consequence. But the emotional or the illogical approach to, or rather the illogical pressures associated with making decisions financially is a very real thing. And so, like I said, I'm not going to say that you're not telling me the truth, but not everybody is going to have the same resolve in saying, I'm just going to look at this from a purely logical perspective as you are. Because the people who took out student loans so that not only they could afford room, board, and books, but so that they could afford food, so they could afford buying a car, so that they could furnish their dorm. And I got a very small refund check out of my student loans at the end of every semester, but that refund check didn't even allow for me to cover the cost of purchasing books, right? Like maybe $200, which was like the cost of, half the cost of one book. And so I just used that $200 to buy food. I was in college, and so we talk about me not finishing college. I went to St. Peter's. It was St. Peter's College, now St. Peter's University in Jersey City, for my freshman year. I stayed on campus. I had the meal plan. I took out student loan. I did not have any money to furnish my dorm. I did not have any money to buy food. I only had the meal plan. There were many days that I went hungry at night because I didn't need to buy food. There were many days that I experienced heartburn for the first time in college, that I sat in my bed awake, feeling this heartburn because I didn't have any Tums. And I'm like, oh my God, what the hell is going on here? I struggled my freshman year of college. I didn't have the money to buy books. I had to have a teacher give me a previous edition of a biology textbook to borrow so that I could get a C in her class. I had a teacher kick me out of the class to go to the office to make photocopies that cost 10 cents per copy. So I had to find somebody to lend me the money to put the coins in the machine to make these copies to go up to the class for the teacher to have moved on to the next section and not be worried about what it is that I just spent all the time trying to make copies on. And so we talk about financial trauma, and we talk about those decisions. Like if you're in that situation, some people are going to make that hard decision because they believe in what is at the end of the light that is at the end of the tunnel, even if they don't know how they're going to get there. And despite making those sacrifices, despite feeling or experiencing those traumas, I didn't even graduate from St. Peter's. I did 1 year. I transferred out. I went to WCC, Westchester Community College, for another year. I transferred out. I moved to Texas. I came back to Connecticut. I transferred out. I finished my associate's degree here in Connecticut. But by that time, I was making money. And I said, well, I'm making money. and I'm making more money than some of the peers that I graduated with who have a 4-year degree. I'm straight. I'm not getting ready to go back to school. I'm not getting ready to take out more loans. And so I was traumatized from that situation and incentivized by the money that I was making in banking to just keep doing what I was doing. And so I asked that question because I wanted to see how you were going to respond. But I also asked that question because a lot of the positions that I take on this topic are based off of my lived experience, validated by the education that I have and the credentials that I carry. And so when I talk about financial psychology, financial therapy, and financial trauma through the lens of the Black experience as a fraction of a larger generational trauma, I'm the embodiment of that. It's not theory by any means for me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, people are human beings, right? You can't expect a person to go through something, especially like you said, a traumatic experience, and not be affected by it, right? The word life is learned intelligence from experience. If you put somebody through something, it has to affect them either negatively or positively, or sometimes both, because you can have a negative effect that ends up turning into a positive later because you use that as a strength to springboard you. You know what I mean? I'm just saying, in the very most simplistic way, is everybody always teaches practice every day. Practice makes perfect. Practice makes perfect if you work at it. I don't know nobody that sends a different message, right? Any successful person, I get up, I do the work. I get up, I do the work. I get up, I do this. So if you keep preaching practice is perfect, work on your craft every day. That's why I keep taking it back to school and saying, then why aren't they changing the initial system of what the craft is to produce a better educated, higher level person sooner, so that when we get to these positions, 14, able to work, we understand money. And we don't go to work, get this money and spend it and blow it. Or when we go to college, guess what? I've been saving since 14 now, right? Regardless of what my parents were financially able to do for me, now I've been saving since 14 because I've legally had a job, right? Now I might not have to take out as many student loans because now I got a little bit of money. So that's all I'm saying, right? I'm saying it's cause and effect. And I do believe wholeheartedly that if you start early and teach somebody something that they can build a foundation on, it's impossible for them. And I'm not saying everybody, I'm just talking in a general sense of the word, for society not to elevate itself because of that.
Yeah, but the thing is, our losses are profitable. Until then, it's never going to change. That's the Fendi fact of it. You know what I'm saying? Unfortunately, and we know that, and that's why these conversations are important to have you on, Rakim. So us to have these conversations in a forum like this to really preach and give the knowledge. Like, y'all went through that door. That door, was hot as hell in there. You know what I mean? Don't go through there. Don't do this. And that's what we need in order to keep going, man. So I definitely appreciate you, bro. We went over an hour and 20. This was a powerful-ass conversation.
It's all right. But look, but before we go, look, you know why Jared likes to give those flowers? Because what you don't realize is you could inspire the next Rakim. This is what we're talking about now. You see, he gave you these flowers, not because he wants to show your accomplishments and show that you don't have to have the Audi 5000. You don't have to have the BMW. You don't have to have the big change. You could be an educated brother that writes for Forbes magazine and still be successful. You understand? He's changing. You're showing that you can change the narrative of what success is. So now the younger you that's looking can be inspired by a different version of a black and brown brother who's successful. And now, yes, by the time they're 21, they're like, no, I'm going to get a condo. You crazy. And you can inspire the next entrepreneur because now they believe it's possible because you're showing them the difference. That's all I wanted to say, baby. I'm potting.
These potting today.
I'm potting, baby.
Yeah, but for everybody on the check-in, man, I want to say thank you again for the check-in, man. This was a real-ass conversation. Rakim, my brother, this was long overdue, man. You're going to be our resident, more than a title financial expert. So when some shit pops off, man, you expect a call from us.
Bring me back.
Wait, Rakim, before you leave, me and Jared, I want to bring him in on it, even if he don't want to come in on it. Me and you could do something. I want to open up the world's largest go-kart course, right? Like, I want to bring Super Mario Kart to real life. I want to throw mushrooms at motherfuckers and banana peels and have motherfuckers crash on the wall. Let's sit down and let's talk if that's if the psychology of it is just my ego that I want to open up this big park because I'm a kid at heart and I didn't need to fuck around as a kid, or if this is feasible business-wise and we can just let off some steam. We got to come up with a business plan.
Let's talk about it.
Kidding me or what?
Kidding me or what, this guy? I like it.
I appreciate you. No, for real, I appreciate you coming through, bro. I learned a lot from you. I know, and like, you know, me and Jared was talking yesterday, man. We was excited to have you on here because even you bringing up the whole word therapy, man. Therapy in the Black and brown community is taboo. Therapy of any kind. Financial, mental, emotional, relationship. When you say that to a Black and brown person, like therapy, they automatically shut down. Shut down. But the way you broke it down, I think is absolutely needed. But it won't happen unless we have these type of conversations. Absolutely. And we bring it to the masses and show them that it's a benefit to having these type of conversations. And absolutely.
Shout out to Roy that's in the chat. He said, good chat, fellas. Keep the conversation going. There's a lot of people suffering because they don't understand their finances. Even something like credit card interest rate, people don't know how it works.
This
is powerful.
Yeah.
Appreciate you, Roy. Thanks for the check-in, baby.
Yeah, thank you, Roy.
Yes, sir. But you already know, broski. Thank you for everybody on check-in. Rakim, thank you, my brother. It was an honor and a pleasure. You know, you got to invite any other time, and we're gonna see you guys next week. We got 2 bangers coming up. We got Emmanuel Nunn from the NFL, and we got David Shan's episode. It's gonna be crazy, crazy. So you already know. We see you guys next week. Have a great weekend, y'all, and thanks again for tuning in to More Than the Title. We see you.